This is the Danger Close Podcast, Beyond the Books with me, Jack Carr. My guest today is my friend Mike Glover of FieldCraft Survival. And Mike had an incredible career in the military, most of that spent in special operations, and then got out, worked for something called other government agencies, and then started FieldCraft Survival, which is based here in Utah, down in Heber. So we talked about a ton of things: his time in the military, preparedness, our love of books, especially classic books on terrorism, insurgencies, counterinsurgencies from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and books on the military that helped us down the path. So without further ado, Mike Glover. All right, I'm joined today by Mike Glover, former Army Special Forces and OGA, other government agency, which we might talk a little bit about, and now the founder of FieldCraft Survival, which is based here in Heber, Utah, which is awesome. And I'm so glad you guys moved from Arizona up here. I'm fired up that we are neighbors and we get to do some cool things together here going forward. So thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, man. It's an honor and privilege, and I'm happy to be in the neighborhood. It's awesome being here.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's such a great spot. And for you guys coming from Prescott, Arizona, which is a cool spot too, but a little harder to get to. It's nice. We have Salt Lake Airport here. People can fly in and zip on up, and then they can see you and maybe do some other things like go to Sundance, go to one of these mountains here to ski or do whatever else. So it's a good spot for you guys. But dude, I want to start off by going into a little bit of background, because some people may not have heard Andy Stump's podcast with you on Cleared Hot, but you guys go deep into background. But I really want to talk to you about what you're doing now with FieldCraft, because I think it's awesome. I love when guys get out of government service, law enforcement, firefighters, whatever it is, and find that next passion in life, find that next mission, and move on. But you had, how many years did you do military?
So I did a total of 18 years. I did 16 active and then a couple years as a Guard Reserve component guy in 19th Special Forces Group.
Okay. And then did you know always growing, because I've seen your library at headquarters, at FieldCraft Survival World headquarters, and I love that library. There's awesome stuff in there. There's classic books on terrorism and insurgencies and counterinsurgencies. There's old magazine articles from the 70s and 80s, the same things that I grew up reading. So were you reading all that stuff growing up, or did you come back to it later and do some more research into the history and perspectives of what people were thinking about terrorism and insurgencies post-Vietnam through the 80s into the 90s? Did you come back to it, or did you read all that stuff growing up?
Yeah, I grew up with books. I mean, that, like you back then, obviously we didn't have a lot of internet virtual interactions, so everything that we did was on print. And so I grew up reading like John Plaster's SOG, Secret Commandos, all these books on MACV, special operations guys at Vietnam. And then I actually have more of my books that set up, which is important to me. I'm always surrounded by that. But in the military growing up, if we were in the field, we didn't have cell phones. If we were, even downrange, we had limited access. So having a book, I think everywhere I went, I had a book in my cargo pocket or a book on my nightstand and was reading something. So I've accumulated probably thousands of books that I'm surrounded with even right now that are just everything from historical references to war, combat, strategy, and even things that I personally enjoy.
Yeah, no, I love that when you post on, so it's Mike A. Glover on Instagram. You can go there, and then FieldCraft Survival has a bunch of different ones, but I love when you take pictures or video of those old books, and then you have maybe something else on there, like an old, a sextant or a compass or something there, and it's just, I love that stuff, because it's a lot similar to how I have things set up here at the house. And by the way, one time, at some point, we're going to do this in person. Right now, we're in a transitional phase as we're looking for our next house here in Utah, so I'm in a temporary studio is the best way to put it, but we'll get together and do one of these in person, because those are so much more fun. And we are doing something in person soon. I think I'm working it out with you guys on date wise, but end of April, I think we're going to do something cool down at FieldCraft Survival HQ.
Yeah, I'm thinking like, obviously a book signing, the new book, Devil's Hand, is going to be really cool to see people come out and books signed. I always thought it was real cool. In fact, I just recently did it. I have it right here, actually. This book, Not a Good Day to Die, by Sean Naylor. And because I don't, realize a lot of the books that I have, but he personally autographed this for me because he went to the PX on Fort Bragg, and it says to Mike Glover, with great respect and deep gratitude for your service during this very challenging period of our history and our nation. Deo Presso Liber, Sean Naylor, and he puts March 18th, 05. Because, this book, I have a lot of buddies from this book about the initial operation Anaconda early on in the global war on terror. And he signed that for me. I remember meeting him, but I didn't realize how long ago it was, 16 years ago. But I think when people tie like the personal story of like meeting you and then the experiences of that book, I think it's super cool. And then having the ability to Q&A and just ask you questions. I know for me, who's a big reader and junkie when it comes to books, that would be super cool to be able to experience that with you. And I think people are going to come from afar to be able to come out and see it. And I think that'd be really cool to do.
Also, people came from a long way away to your opening that you did last month. Like you did the grand opening at here in Heber, and I pulled in, and I'm in my Land Cruiser, and we have some same people that follow you, follow me as well. And immediately, I was walking across the parking lot, and people are asking me to sign, M4 magazines and Glock magazines and stuff. And I walk in, and people came from all over. It was amazing. People came from all over the country, which is really cool, and it speaks to what you've been able to build and what you're doing and how you connect with people. Because there's a lot of different companies out there doing training and things like that, but you have this following, built this trust with a very engaged group of people that want to make themselves more self-reliant and their families more self-reliant. So that was so cool to see, and that place was amazing. I mean, that was an incredible. People came from everywhere. So yeah.
That was totally unexpected as well, because we could bring people together. It's something that we've been doing from the very beginning, because it's weird because I don't think about business when it comes to those kind of things, because I want people to feel included in the conversation. And a lot of our references for education are free. I mean, it's podcasts, it's articles, it's YouTube videos. So when we bring people together like that, I always like to see people coming together for like a common good. Because there's so many divisive things in the world that we could be ripped apart. And I always look at preparedness as a way, like a conduit to bring people together. And it was so cool to see, because people did travel, from all over the United States to come to that grand opening. We tracked over 400 people coming and going. A whole bunch of people signed the guest book. And then the fact that you, Neil from Ready Gunner, Casey, his wife, Sean Whalen, just dropped in to say hello, meant a lot. And it was really cool as an experience, because I think people follow you on social media, they follow me on social media, but to be able to interact in person and go, oh, this is happening, this is real, is super cool for people.
Yeah, no, that was it. The energy was amazing. It was just what a great community of people. So that was really cool to see. So hopping back to some of these books. So I grabbed a couple off my shelf real quick, because we talked about one of these earlier on. But so I have those same ones, like this thing right here. I think this one's 1987. I mean, you can just see the artwork and everything else is in here, and I have some things highlighted. So I love going back and looking at this stuff as I'm doing research. This one's, I think, 1980. Right here, another one right here, but going back and seeing what the perspective was on terrorism with that pre-9/11 paradigm. This one right here, I think this is 1978 or 76 or something like that, but I have this collection in here, so as I'm doing my research, I don't have to just get online and go with whatever pops up first, because there's a lot going on. I can say, okay, what was going on back then? If I need to get in the head of a character that's a certain age that came up during a certain time, what were they studying? What was their experience? So I love that, and I love that your library is just down the road in case I run out of things here. And when last time we were together, we talked about, remember Hans Halberstadt? We talked about him. So I found my old books. I found my old ones, and I think the first one I read was this one. Was that one right there, was Green Berets right there. And I remember going through this, and it was, oh man, this was so awesome. I read this thing so many times in high school. Like I think I got this when I was a freshman, maybe a sophomore. But I remember looking at these photos, reading the Vietnam parts, looking at the weapons, what was hinted at, the training, all of this. It was just, I love this thing. So this had a huge impact on me. And then this thing came out. Bam! Look at that right there, SEALs. So I'm looking at this thing, and I was already on that path, but I was like, oh man, he did this. How do you look? Let's slip the frogs of war. It says. I mean, like, awesome. When you're reading this, when you're like, 16, or maybe 15, whatever it was, awesome. And the photos, and then now I know some of these guys. Like some of these guys are my BUDS instructors. I can recognize them. But I saw this, and so what did I do? I started putting ropes up in the backyard, try to simulate some of this stuff as I'm training. What else you're gonna do? You can't log online and go to the internet and find out BUDS training programs. But you can see this picture and be like, oh, they're holding heavy objects over their head. So what am I going to do? I'm going to hold heavy objects over my head. How long? I don't know. As long as I can. And then we talked about this one too. Remember this? We talked about the SWAT one where it gives up some. Do you have it over there?
But
nice. Look at that. Awesome. The Power series. I don't know what year this one came out, but I want to reread this one because when we were talking the other day, I think this is the one that you mentioned that had let something slip in here. There's something in here that maybe shouldn't have been in here. It was the first time it was mentioned, something about, Delta or something or other that didn't make it into the other books.
There's 3 things that you're not supposed to talk about that I got in a classified brief in one paragraph in this book. And I'm like, oh, wow.
Exactly. And this guy had some good access for back then. You got to do some cool stuff. I don't know if he's still around or still writing. I have 2 other books of his over there on the shelf, but things like that was powerful back in the day when we were growing up. And I worry today with my kids, I see that there's so many more distractions, and the way they're interacting, especially during COVID, is through these video games. And they're out there, and I can hear our little guy, and I can hear him talking and laughing, and I can see that he's just connected with his friends and that sort of thing. But I know eventually he'll be connected outside of that. Whole world is going to be open to him as soon as he figures his way around these parental controls. But I don't see kids in stuff like this today.
Yeah.
So when people, kind of ask me what like the modern day equivalent of this is people following you, is making wise decisions about who to follow on social media, because they're probably not going to go back, and there's probably not a slew of kids that are reading these books today because there are so many other distractions out there, and they have so much bandwidth, and it's going to be allocated to a bunch of different things where we had television, or you could ride your bike to the video store maybe and rent something, or you could read a book, or you could go climb a tree. Like that's it. Or maybe Atari 2600, but you can only do that for so long. So today, that's why it's so important who you follow and who you like, what those people put out, because that's the equivalent of going through this book time and time again. So yeah, if you're following somebody and they talk about different weapon systems or whatever, and then they do it again the next week. Well, guess what? I was going to this thing and reading it over and over and over again. Yeah, that's the equivalent of seeing a similar post or whatever else. But I think that's really the modern day equivalent. So it's important that you're out there doing what you're doing, and I certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. For us, it was more of like an analog experience to like touch and feel, and it was like a tangible thing. And we just appreciated it more because we didn't have the access to so much. I mean, like you took one picture, you cut it out, you put it on your wall, you read every word 10 times, and then you referenced it every time you were thinking about it. But now you have so much access to information, it almost seems overwhelming. And I like to slow things down and have the long form conversation when it comes to things like this. And I think you're absolutely right. You could completely find the wrong things that just lead you down a rabbit hole that's not going to be, it's not going to allow you to be productive and find a lot of value in things. I mean, this is our dopamine hit, but this is like the slow burn version.
Exactly. And then you go back the next day for your next hit for a little inspiration to get out there and keep going down the path. Because there weren't but you had to search that out. Like that just didn't come to you. You had to actually take some initiative and go figure out where to get these books, like with Paladin Press or something. I think that a lot of these things came from back in the day. But you had to search that out. Most people didn't. If they didn't have someone in the house that maybe gave them a Soldier of Fortune magazine or a Gung Ho magazine back in the day, and then you see an ad for Paladin Press and see a bunch of books on there, like Anarchist Cookbook or whatever else. Like, oh, that sounds awesome. Like let's do that. Hey, can someone? I remember even back in the day trying to get my dad to order it through his office so that the government wouldn't find out that I ordered the Anarchist Cookbook. Like I remember thinking about that back then. That's junior high school, I still have it over there, right in the corner on the shelf over there. But you had to go out and do that. That was like physical. You're taking initiative. And whereas today, it's like there's so many inputs that you can just sit back and whoever's that loudest voice or whatever's giving you that stimulation, like, oh, what's that? I'm gonna go in that direction. And I don't know. I don't know how that's going to end up, especially, I think of it in terms of my kids, but it's really everybody's kids out there. Like, they don't have to take the initiative to go and do this. They just have to be distracted by something over here. And all those people and all those companies are trying to do that same thing. And they're trying to get that kid for whatever reason and get him on board early, kind of that gateway drug to, whatever they're trying to get him into, whether that's a car, or whether it's an Apple product, or whatever else it is, or an ideology. Like it's tough out there. We got to choose. It's almost like the kids today, they're not really getting that same choice because they're getting inundated with so much. And my hope is that they get inundated with, guys like you, guys like Andy, guys like Jocko out there, and, they'll make these wise choices and follow those people, whether it's on a social platform or via books or whatever else, or a training course. Even more importantly, getting out there with your team when they're the right age, to say, hey, learn how to do these things, learn how to self-rescue, learn how to apply a tourniquet, learn how to operate a firearm. All those things that are so important to being self-reliant, being your own first responder. So I'm doing my best to get my kids down that path, and got our daughter out hunting early. She just naturally was inclined to do that without any sort of prompting from me. So this our little guy coming up though. We'll get him down to FieldCraft HQ here pretty soon and let him wander around and see what you guys have going on to get him on the path.
Yeah, we want to do things for kids because I think it's important. If you look at the Boy Scouts and even the Cub Scouts of America, obviously they've had some issues, and there's not really a good place where you could, put your kids into a program and have them understand and learn about being better prepared. It's also super fun. I think the model for FieldCraft is this idea that it doesn't have to be super burdensome or anxious. It could be something that's fun, like overlanding, for example, because we could teach survival, first aid, outdoor wilderness survival is super interesting because it's fun, but then you're learning something along the way. So anything that we do, we want to make interesting, especially trying to capture even people's attention, not just kids, but people's attention has become very difficult because they're so inundated with everything. I would always tell people, outside of like your likes and dislikes versus book versus media, at least start your little library and collection, because when all things fail, you don't have electricity, your reference for everything, your Google at home on your shelf is going to be your reference for information. And I like to think that way because it justifies me buying cool books, but it also allows me to have like tangible words on the shelf for references for things that I want to know, where, in the absence of electricity, I have somewhere to go.
Yeah, and not just that. Nowadays, if everything is online, that history can be changed, can be morphed. Obviously, you're seeing things in your feed that are there first, second, third, fourth on that first page for a reason. So I'm going back and getting Encyclopedia Britannicas from 1955, 65, 75, 85, 95. So I have those as reference points. And also, as from an academic sense, being able to look, okay, what did this word mean in 1955, 65, 75 versus today? And when I put something in the Google search bar, what pops up versus what would pop up in 1965 when I'm looking at this encyclopedia here, looking at the exact same thing. So for me, it's a very interesting study, just cultural study in how things are evolving and how much control is really exerted by by big tech in general. And that's something, I think about every day.
Is that for your writing too? Because if you're writing from a historical perspective, like from the 60s, like Cold War, you could have that reference for what that word actually meant.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. I looked up direct action not too long ago, and I looked, and it was over the summer because I saw it being used in some of the civil unrest, and I looked up the military definition from like 1998 or something like that, whatever was in one of the books up here. And it was very different from what popped up in the Google search. So that's an interesting one for people if they have a reference from something in the, I don't know, maybe 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and then put something in the Google search bar today just to see, hey, how words are being used. Because a thing I say more often than not is precision in language reflects precision in thought. But at the same time, that language can be manipulated, especially when it's coming up in the first page of a Google search and it's there being changed for a reason. So for me, that's fascinating. Both because I have kids and, as a citizen and worried about future generations, but also in my writing, also as I develop these characters and develop these conspiracies and all these sorts of things that I weave into the themes of the novels. So I encourage people to go out there and get a library, go in a physical library like you do, because once again, the touch of a button, that stuff could be gone. Not to mention lack of electricity. But I want to go back also and talk about your 18 years. So it wasn't all in special forces, right? You bounced around a little bit, and you did the Tomb of the Unknown. You did that for a while. Is that how you came in? Was that your intro?
Yeah. So it's interesting. When I was just opening this book, I didn't even realize that I had a picture of me as a tomb guard in the book that I've seen probably since 1997.
Wow.
Like, that picture was just in this, and I'm like, oh wow, like I probably should go through these books. But yeah, I joined the Army to be an airborne ranger, and when I did so, I didn't realize they choose your MOS as it's called 11 X-ray, which is they get to choose what 11 series you are, and infantry is the series. So they have 11 Bravo. They used to have 11 Bravos, 11 Charlies, 11 Mikes, and 11 hotels, which were different specialties. So when I went to infantry basic training with an airborne ranger contract, I was supposed to go through an 11 Bravo, or just think of it like an infantry guy who walks through the woods, like light infantry guy, pipeline. But when they segmented us in platoons, which there was no rhyme or reason to that, they literally went, okay, the first 30 guys, your first platoon, 11 Bravos. The second 30 guys, you're 11 hotels. They made me an 11 hotel, which is an infantry guy that uses heavy armor and heavy weapons. So basically an infantry guy that gets to ride in a GMV or a Humvee at the time and use 50 cals, Mark 19s, and heavy weapons and tow missile systems. And so at the end of basic, they were like, hey, the ranger instructors are coming to pick up the rangers candidates to go to ranger and doctor program. And so they came and then they went. And then I told the drill sergeant, I'm like, hey, I'm supposed to be a ranger. And he said, no, you're 11 hotel. They don't have 11 hotels in Ranger. And I was like, what? No, 25th Infantry Division in Fort Lewis, Washington. I'm like, I have airborne ranger on my contract. And they were like, you should have told us before. It's your fault. I'm like, wow. Okay. So, long story short, the only way I could change my MOS right then and there was if they sent me to the 3rd Infantry Regiment, which was the Old Guard. And I didn't even know what the Old Guard was. But basically they said, if you go there, we'll change your MOS. And then after 2 years, you put in paperwork and you go to Ranger, which is what they told everybody. So I went to the Old Guard and realized it's a ceremonial unit, but it also has components that are like, they had a scout platoon at the time that did Op 4, playing bad guys for Ranger Regiment. And they had specialty platoons like the U.S. Army drill team, the Tomb of the Unknowns. And I said, you know what, at least I'll make the best of my time. So I went to airborne school, ranger school, got my tomb identification badge, served as a guard at the tomb for a couple of years. And this is all pre 9/11. And then when 9/11 kicked off, I went to Special Forces selection and then spent the rest of my time in special operations.
That's wild. So you didn't even know that it was a ceremonial unit. You can't Google it. And, hey, you get in that line, off you go. And so you didn't really know until you showed up there what
Yeah.
you'd be doing for the next 2 years, which at the time, how old are you then? You're 18, 19, 20? How old?
I was 17.
17. So 2 years when you're 17 years old seems like forever. Like
Oh
that,
yeah.
2 years, that's half of high school. Like that's crazy at 17. Now it's like 2 years, whatever. Whatever that time-space continuum thing is, like that's a real thing as time going faster as you get older. But at 17, that's forever. So you show up there, you're like, man, I got to polish my boots. I have to have this haircut. I have to do this stuff. I was expecting to be jumping out of planes and like placing claymores and rocking it on these ambushes. And I think at the time we all thought we were going to go downrange and do secret stuff in the middle of the night and then come back. And that was like what we thought, because there wasn't any, you didn't know. I mean, you just got everything from these books. It made it seem like we're going to go save the world and come back and have beers, And in real life, you get to your unit and they're like, hey, here's a mop, go clean the bathroom. You're like, well, what about the secret mission? And that didn't really happen until after September 11th anyway, for most of us. There were flashpoints along the way and guys got to, rock it in Mogadishu and places like that. But for the most part, my experience and those of our contemporaries was pretty much you didn't get to do what you thought you were going to do until after September 11th. So you're there, you're polishing your shoes, you got the glasses on, you're doing your thing. Like there's nothing else like that out there. I mean, maybe some of the Great Britain, maybe, but that's pretty incredible having to do that day and day. Is that stressful, having to be out there in front of a crowd? And for those that don't know, can you give a little rundown on what you're doing there and a little background on that?
Yeah. So the Tomb of the Unknowns has been in Arlington National Cemetery since the 30s and 40s. It was actually started with a World War I unknown that was brought in the 30s. And the idea was it would be guarded by the Army 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in memorial to all of those men and women who served and died on the battlefields. And, at the time, obviously in World War I, World War II, Korea, and even Vietnam, these unknowns were remains that they couldn't identify. So they couldn't associate them with any kind of identification. So the original crypt, which is the big thing that's known for being the Tomb of the Unknowns, underneath that crypt is the World War I unknown. In front, you have Korea, Vietnam, and World War II. And that's been guarded by the Army since 1948, 24 hours a day. The 3rd Infantry Regiment, which is the oldest infantry regiment in the Army, has guarded that. And so to be a tomb guard, you have to try out. You have to go through about 7 to 9 months of training. You get your tomb identification badge, which behind the astronaut's badge is the rarest badge in the military. And at the time, I was badge holder 470. So I was
wow.
170th person to be awarded the badge since 1948. And then since then, there's only been a couple hundred added to that. It's 3 release based on height. I'm 6'1", so anywhere from 6 foot to 6'2". Second release 6'2" to 6'4", and first release is 6'4" and above. And we rotate in a fireman schedule to guard that rain, snow, sleet, or heat in Arlington Cemetery 24 hours a day. It's something that was a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. And to be honest, the most difficult thing I've done. I mean, I've been to Ranger School, different special operations selections, a whole bunch of training, and to 7 to 9 months of being perfect for your uniform. I actually pulled it up yesterday when I was cleaning my stuff out. You have to memorize 27 pages of knowledge verbatim. You have to be like perfect in every way to be able to guard the tomb, and it has to be continuously. And it was a super interesting duty, a privilege for me to guard that. But it kicked off my career in the right direction because it set me up for discipline, understanding really about selfless service. And yeah, man, it was stressful. It was an 18-year-old coming on to guard the tomb and having 2,000 people observe your every movement was pressure. That was real pressure.
It's stressful to watch. I've been there and I've seen it. It's stressful to watch because you're like, oh, I hope this doesn't drop this, or like, it's crazy to see. And how long are those shifts? Like changing the guard, how long are you out there before you do the changing the guard?
So the summertime, it's every 30 minutes.
Oh,
and
wow.
on average, do 7 to 9 walks The guard change itself is about 6 to 7 minutes. So what happens is you rotate, you do a guard change, you come back downstairs, and you only have 20 minutes. So you never get out of uniform. You kind of just get a reset, square your stuff back away, and then you go back up again. And you'll do anywhere from 6 to 8 walks per day in the summer. You can, on that plaza, which is all concrete, you can have 100+ degree temperatures, and you're in a wool dress blues uniform. And then during the wintertime, it's every hour on the hour. And then, we're in blues the entire time. And then at nighttime, we do go to battle dress uniform, and we guard in a roving patrol around the tomb of the end at night.
Jeez, that is wild. So when you go downstairs, you're not like cracking a beer, putting your feet up, watching TV. Like, you're making sure you're ready to go again in 30 minutes.
No breaks. Let me show you something real quick that your guests will probably dig.
That is wild.
So I found this yesterday when I was going through my stuff. So this is a ribbon that was on the U.S. Naval. It was actually, so here's a story. It was actually transported and accompanied on a wreath the World War I unknown soldier from France.
Wow.
This actual ribbon was presented to the U.S. Naval Hospital in 1936.
Dang.
And this came across the ocean in 1920s with the World War I unknown. So this is a piece of history. I found this Department of the Navy letter.
Whoa.
With a certificate. It says, and Mr. Metzler, who was the Arlington National Cemetery historian, who since has passed, but he says, I am proud to deliver this important piece of history for display in the museum at Arlington. As indicated, this ribbon was presented with flowers which accompanied the World War I unknown soldier from France. The frame ribbon was presented to the U.S. Naval Hospital in 1936 and was disestablished in 1991. It was transferred to the medical clinic in Philadelphia. And what's crazy is this was given to me by the Arlington National Cemetery historian, Mr. Metzler. I found it in a basement at the Tomb of the Unknowns in the catacombs, which is an underground place where we stage. And I asked him, I said, hey, what is this? And he goes, let me take a look. And he looked at it and he goes, I don't know, if you want it, you could take it. And I'm like, it was in a box collecting dust. And I feel obligated to give this to a museum or something. I've actually contacted a few, but I'm holding on to it right now. But it's a piece of history that accompanied the World War I unknown. It's insane.
That's amazing. I mean, imagine what else is out there in a box somewhere. I mean, Raiders of the Lost Ark going down, thing at the end. Like, what are in those boxes? But just in some dusty attic somewhere, or somebody like you that went home and has this thing, doesn't even know what they have really. There's got to be all these all over the country. There's got to be these amazing artifacts out there, particularly from that time period, from World War I, World War II, things those guys brought back. That's incredible. Gosh, amazing. So you got attention to detail down in those first couple of years. Like, you don't have a choice. You're going to be out there in front of everybody. You're getting an inspection. Probably before you walk out, there's somebody that's looking, boom, 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 and you go, kind of like a bullpen as you get ready to go out. So you do that for 2 years. Does anybody stay? Like, that seems like high stress. That seems much more stressful to me than going into Ramadi at the height of the war. I would much rather head into town and do that than have my uniform immaculate and walk out in front of a bunch of people. Like, that's terrifying to me, which is probably why I ended up in the SEAL teams where I did. But that's a lot of stress. And does anybody stay there for 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years and do that for, I don't know, till retirement? Or is everybody different?
I think the average tomb guard lasts 2 to 3 years because it's not only challenging mentally because of all the attention to detail and just being, it's a lot of time invested as well, but it's physically challenging just to stand there and click your heels together. I don't want to ever make it seem like it's physical as compared to special operations, but it's just a different type of physical stress because you learn very quickly how to deal and manage with standing still in austere environments. I sweat profusely and I sweat and gnats stuck to my face. And mosquitoes, and it was very distracting, but very physically distressing. And I think the average is probably 2 to 3 years, which gets you about 500 to 1,000 walks. I think before I left the tomb, I had 750 walks at the Tomb of the Unknowns, and then guard a few hundred times, acting as the sergeant of the guard. I made E5 when I was 20, and then, was very young as a sergeant in the infantry, and then changed the guard for the rest of my time there before I went to selection.
Jeez, it's stressing me out just talking about that sort of thing. So then you go to selection, you put in your papers, you do that kind of a tryout, probably like we did, push-ups, sit-ups, run, just to get into selection or to qualify to get in. And then do you go right to Q course? Like you just show up, head from DC to Bragg and start the Q course? Is that how that works?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, I got TDY. I traveled to Bragg, went to selection. I was successful at selection. I came back. And then got a Q course date and then started the Q course. I think I started the Q course in 2002. And that's depending on the MOS, the job specialty, it's a 2 to 3 year journey. So my journey in training began right there.
And what was your MOS? Did you know ahead of time what you're going to be, if you're going to be like a weapons sergeant or you're going to be comms or intel or whatever?
What's interesting is, and I've told this story on online or social before, is you get an order of merit based on what you want, but needs of the Army are going to point you in the right direction. So you have a weapons specialist, communication specialist, engineer specialist, and then a medical specialist. And I only wanted to be a 18 Bravo, which is a special forces weapons specialist. And that's weapons, that's tactics. Even though I was in the old guard, I was airborne ranger qualified. I had experience in the infantry, and so they made me a commo guy. But here's what they did. Back then, everything wasn't digital. It was on orders. And I remember standing in line, and I had my orders in front of me, and they said they had just given us our orders, and I'm in formation, and they hand us our orders, and you're reporting to your 18 series specialty, and you're linking up with the guy who's going to be in charge of your destination. And back then I was 22 years old. I was young and dumb, and I looked at my orders and it said 18E. And so I looked down and it was like, there's no way, man. I cannot be a combo guy. There's no way. So I took a pen and I changed the E to a B.
No way.
I straight up just wrote everywhere it said 18 Echo, I just wrote B's because there was no identification for translating like a specialty assigned to a number in a computer. And so I knew that. So it was just you show up and then they see it. And so I was standing in line and I was nervous because I was like, man, I don't want to get in trouble, but this is my destiny forever. And I was like, I can't be a commo guy. So I gave the guy my orders, and I'm in a line with 18 Bravos, 7 of us. And he takes my orders and he looks at it and he goes, okay. And he looks at his list on the board and my name's not there. And then he looks at the orders and then he looks at the name on the board and he goes, huh. He goes, you're not on my list. And I was like, I don't know, Sergeant. I'm not sure what, I'm just playing. I don't know. And he goes, and he just writes my name on the board and hands me back my orders and tells me to line. So I'm sitting there for the first 72 hours thinking, man, are they going to figure it out and then move me into an 18 Echo slot? And they never do. I mean, and I know the speed of the Army and how they're navigating things because war just kicked off, right? We're in the middle. When I reported, we were in the middle of the Afghan campaign. In the middle of the Q course, about the middle of training, we're in the Iraqi campaign. So the priority was war. And I know these guys don't care, man. This is a garrison army evolving into a wartime army. And they're just getting war fighters kicked out of the Q course. Not kicked out bad way, but kicked them out down the road so they can go to war.
Yeah.
And so I changed my destiny right then and there, became a special forces weapons guy for the rest of my career.
Dude, I love that. I gotta use that in a novel. That's fantastic. I did not know that. That's amazing. I love it. Because we go through training all together. You do your 6 months of buds, and then you go to have 3 months at the time anyway of SEAL qualification training. Now it's like another 6 months for a year, but you don't know what you're going to do until you get to your team, at least back then. And of course, I want to be a point man. I wanted the same thing. I want to be weapons, point man. I'd read all these Vietnam books here. Point man is where I want to be. And they're like, they have a conversation with your chief, and he's like, "Oh, you seem semi-intelligent, comms." I'm like, "What?" Oh man, that's the guy that gets shot next to the lieutenant in all those Vietnam movies I grew up watching. Like, you have the big antenna, and that's like the first guy to go. I'm like, son of a man. But so I went to comm school. But then you're all doing the same things. You're all shooting and doing all the other stuff together. But then you have the specialty, medic or whatever you're gonna do. And it actually ended up working out well for me in that once I became an officer, I knew the comm side of mission planning. So I knew that sort of thing, and I could help I could help the new comm guys as a new officer. I could help him with the radios, so he's not the only guy running around going to fix things or whatever. Like, I could take care of my own stuff. I didn't have to be like, my radio's not working. Hey, can somebody come over and help me? Like, I knew how to do it myself, and I could make those comm shots. I knew about the HF shots, even though we didn't really do that sort of thing anymore once the war kicked off anyway, in my experience. But that is awesome. So you go weapons, somebody else is going comms, or somebody else, the engineers are going to blow up stuff. So you're doing that separately, but under that Special Forces, Special Warfare Training Center umbrella. And you all do your separate things, which are different amounts of time. And then you come back together, depending, maybe not the same people, because different courses are different lengths. But you come back with a group, and then you go to Robin Sage, or you do some other things before you do language. Is that how that works?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, you basically go out and you do small unit tactics, at least when I went through, and you get a baseline for understanding how to shoot, move, communicate in the wood line. So patrolling, FM 7-8, basic patrolling and small unit tactics, understand how to do raids, ambushes. And, as a Ranger qualified infantry guy, even though I was young, I was put in a leadership position because you're running a whole bunch of guys from varied backgrounds. I mean, the cool thing about Special Forces, the Green Berets, I think, is a lot of people have different experiences and backgrounds, which makes them really cool as an asset, where you might have an 18 Delta who was a paramedic. You might even have an 18 Delta who was a medical doctor. And these people are going out to get their specialty training and then coming back together again to culminate in Robin Sage, which I think is our specialty, which is unconventional warfare, this fake culmination exercise in this scenario-based world, which is called Pineland. And in Pineland, which is based in Rockingham, North Carolina, the Appalachians. It was really cool as an experience because you jump in, you train an auxiliary force, you mentor, you assist, advise, and then you go conduct operations. It was the true Green Beret mission, and I felt like I got set up for success there. After that, you go to survival school. You have to go to SEER, high risk level C, which is for special operations and aviators. And then you go to language school. And my language at the time was French, because our AOR, area of operation, was Africa. Even though I even in third group, I never went to Africa. I went to the Middle East.
So you know where you're going at this point. What point do you find out what group you're going to?
Right before you go to language school, they identify what group you're going to go to. Okay. And the only group I wanted to go to at the time was third or fifth, because I heard they were in the middle of war. So they were war fighting, and I knew that if I had third or fifth, there was a high probability I was going straight to war out of the Q course, and I did. We did. But I always thought it was funny because I could read and write Korean because I'm half Korean, but I was a Korean guy, speaking French, operating in the Middle East, and had no synergy in lining those things up. But that's the way of the academic world and special operations.
Yeah, that's the military in general. Like same thing. Yeah, native Spanish speaker. Okay, boom, boom. Okay, you're going to wherever, a place where they don't speak Spanish. That's probably where you're going to go, and we're going to give you a language that's not Spanish. Like it's just crazy. You should have been going probably to first group, and head in that direction. But no, it's the military, which is fantastic. It's kind of it's a huge bureaucracy, and that's just how it's been since the beginning of time. It's classic. There's a reason that these stereotypes about the military exist, and that's a reason right there. Just a data point, crazy. And your SEER, was your SEER on Bragg? Is that one on Bragg?
Yes, I went to the Camp McCall, and then it was ran by the Special Warfare Center. So it's I think a different experience than the Air Force version of it. But it was a great experience. It was, they call it Camp Slappy.
Yep.
Like when you go, you learn about education. Super interesting experience and something I think that set me up for success for war.
Yeah, no, it'd be interesting to see if they've morphed any of that over time, because mine was definitely based on the Vietnam experience when I went through in '98 or whenever I went to SEER school. But yeah, I definitely built TAP codes and all the rest of it. Definitely Vietnam. And then I went to a more advanced one that was a pilot course even before 9/11. But it was kind of like, hey, if you're snatched off the street in Lebanon, like this, what's there, and you're thrown in front of a camera then or whatever else, and it worked all those things in that didn't necessarily they didn't really cover in the more classic type post or Vietnam era SEER school that was my original experience. But and so you go to third group and off you go downrange. Like do you have a workup? Do you have like a year-long workup, or how did no, you just get thrown in the mix?
Yeah, well, when I arrived, I kind of pinpointed the battalion I wanted to go to, and 2nd Battalion, 3rd Special Forces Group was going to war. And I started assimilating and getting ready, but we were already they were already sending guys over on Advon, advancing to pre-stage for war. So this time was about 04, 05 period, and it was super active in fire bases in remote places on the Pakistan border at the time. And so I hit the ground, and I think I probably spent 2 weeks on the ground, 2 weeks at Bragg in 3rd group before I was on a plane headed over to war.
Wow.
So
were you taking somebody's place and that they'd worked up together, or were you just just throwing it like, get out there, we need more guys out here in these outstations or wherever you went?
So my first team was a mountain team in 3rd Special Forces Group, and they run a senior junior per MOS on a Green Beret operational detachment. And my senior had just went in and got surgery for an injury he sustained on a rotation before that one in Afghanistan. So immediately when I hit the ground, they're like, "Hey, your senior's gone, so you're the senior, and we need you to be downrange." And so I immediately went. Like when I reported to my team room, half of my team was already downrange, setting up the fire base.
Okay.
When I hit the ground in Afghanistan, the burden of responsibility was pretty overbearing because there was nobody else. It was like hit the ground running and learn on the way. So it happened rapidly. And that rotation, I was there when SEAL Team 10 lost an aircraft and lost
Red Wings. Yeah.
In fact, my company, I was on the or after that, and then my company, the scuba team and one of our ruck teams went in to rescue Marcus Luttrell with the Ranger Battalion in the village. There was obviously components to that, but Operation Red Wings is what it's historically known as. I was on an airfield waiting to recover, whether it was bodies or recovering good guys off the battlefield. We are in a capacity with MH-47s to be able to respond. And that rotation was a 9-month rotation for me in a remote fire base, in a fire base called Naray, which at the time was the furthest northern fire base above Asadabad and Jalalabad, which was on the Pakistan border.
Jeez. And then that's baptism by fire, 9 months on the Paki border. Like that's no joke right there. So you come back 9 months. That's your first real deployment?
Yeah.
Wow.
First time to war, and was a super eye-opening experience. I learned a ton. And then, in the cycle that is war at that time period, and this, there wasn't a lot of time off. I mean, I got back, I think I went to a school, like one of our advanced CQB schools, like a couple of weeks after I hit the ground.
Nice. Sephardic, is that the one?
Sephardic, yeah.
Nice.
I went to
I always wanted to go there. I always put in for that. They never got to. I put in for Ranger School. I put in for Sephardic. I put in for all these things, and I was like E3, E4, E5. I just wanted to, just get that experience. That was all pre September 11th. Yeah, they never let me go. So, oh well. But you do Sephardic, so you're rocking and rolling CQB, and then right back into the mix.
Right back to Iraq. I went back to Iraq, or went straight to Iraq after that. I think I had a couple of weeks of time off right before we deployed, and then was operating. I got an opportunity that was pretty rare in my community, which is I got to move over to the CIF company, the Commanders and Extremists Company, which is now called the Commanders Response Force Company, which now technically is in limbo because they're thinking about making them deep underground companies for different underground tunnel systems.
Huh.
But you had to have 2 years of team time. You had to have Sephardic, and you had to come recommended from your detachment and your company sergeant major. And I was in Charlie Company, 2nd Battalion, and my sergeant major went to become the 5th sergeant major after our rotation, and he vouched for me. In fact, he requested me and a couple other guys from the company. So I just moved next door from Charlie Company to Bravo Company, which put me in the slot to go immediately downrange. And, they asked me, they said, Mike, you're going to have to deploy like immediately. And you had no time off. I'm like, that's what I was there for. So I was more than excited and moved over to the CIF company after Sephardic and went straight to war with the CIF.
Oh, wow.
Did that in Iraq in 05, 06, 07, 08, and did 3 right back-to-back rotations to Iraq with the Commanders and Extremist Force.
No way. Yeah, so I went into Haiti in 2004 with Charlie 3rd of the 7th. So I was like the SEAL liaison with those guys. But that was a really cool experience because, I'm at home, like on the couch on a Friday, and I get a call, and I thought I was in trouble for like something, and they called me back in. I'm like, oh man. So I go back in, and they're like, all right, you're going down to wherever we staged from. I forget where it was because we tried to get in one place with a bird and then had a problem, and it couldn't turn or something. Anyway, so we had some emergency just getting there. But yeah, we palletized everything, and they threw a bunch of people together, and we went down there. But that was my first time seeing Army come together, not just big Army, but with all those other assets, but special operations in general, like have nothing, just essentially a tarmac, and then put up this crazy command and control center, have all the birds, have the CIF company, have everybody working together, having the whole on the floor, the whole rock drills going on with not just you for actions on objective, but all the aircraft and all the supporting assets as well on this huge hangar floor, and then getting the birds and go. So that was my first time like seeing that come together from nothing, because up to that point I'd gone to a place and it had been already set up. People had been there first. This is my first time going in and seeing how the Army and Army SF in particular sets everything up like that from zero, and that was really cool to see. And then there's some other deployments that followed. I had experience with Army SF, and they were all great. And then I had my last 2 deployments. I had more Army SF guys under me as I worked my way kind of up the chain or whatever. Then I had SEALs. So in these outstations, I had different ODAs out there, and always had an amazing experience with those guys. Absolutely loved it. Still dear friends with with a few of the guys, but with one warrant officer in particular. And here in the warrant officer program for Army SF, like that's legit. Like ours is not good in the Navy, in the SEAL teams. Like you don't learn anything counterinsurgency, insurgency, terrorism specific. Like you go there and you learn, you learn stuff about being on a ship and what fork to use and all that stuff to try to civilize you for the wardroom or something. But Army SF warrant officer program, like that is legit. I've learned a ton from those guys in the academic side of the house as far as warfare, terrorism, insurgencies go. And those were all great experiences. But yeah. So for you, you're back in your 3 deployments to Iraq, and of those, and that's before you went over to special mission unit type stuff, right? So of those experiences, so now you have 4 deployments, all of them combat. Afghanistan, 3 Iraq. What were some of the most formative experience when you look back on that time period? What were some of the most formative experiences that you had downrange? Is there one that sticks out or two that stick out?
Yeah, I think, '07 for me historically was the most significant. But one, it's because of the height of Al Qaeda in Iraq and the fact that, I was part of Stanley McChrystal's Task Force 16 at the time, which included SMUs, Ranger Battalion, the SIF. And we were going out as action arms, operating with one centralized intelligence element that was driving these operations against all these HVTs in Iraq. It was crushing their backs, but it was a lot of warfighting. I mean, every action arm as part of Task Force 16, which has changed numbers obviously throughout the years, but McChrystal's I think ideology was, hey, there's a strategic campaign, but part of that campaign is killing and capturing in a franchise model as many bad guys as possible. And to be part of that, where every single night, 22 SAS, us, the Ranger Regiment, the SMUs were going out and having significant results in the battlefield that were just, I remember one time we had, killed an HVT. His predecessor had stood up. We killed him the next night. And then a week later, we had captured the guy who was his predecessor, and he didn't even know he was the predecessor. Like, he hadn't even gotten the word yet.
Right.
He was trying to become the emir of that particular cell, because we had the intelligence that was leading, like, hey, he's next in line. We need to roll these guys up.
Yeah.
So, not only was it the most effective war fighting that I've seen in my own personal experiences, but also as a task force. But it's also when we lost a ton of guys. We were losing guys. I had a dog save my life and bit a suicide bomber about 50 meters in front of me. I had all these things that were happening, but it's a significant moment where I just said, this is exactly where I need to be. We were operating under an SMU at the time. We were augmenting them, and it was just an incredible experience. And it just kind of set me up with the right mindset, the right path to do SMU time and to go over the, across the fence and do some cool stuff in my own experiences. It motivated me to do that.
Yeah. And that was definitely a formative time in special operations history, no doubt about it. And you're operating out of the green zone right there with those houses along the river.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's I was there with the doing the agency stuff then. So I was right there next door. You had the little airfield right there, with the birds, and so yeah, right there on the line with SAS, with us, with you guys. That was a crazy time, and it I didn't look at it at the time this way, but now when I look back on it, well, very formative, obviously, but also laid some of the foundation, particularly for that second novel, for True Believer, where I'm talking about and fictionalizing, of course, my experience during that time frame, right there in those same houses along the river where you're talking about. But so then you come back, and are you kind of like seeing what's going on with the SMUs at that time and saying, hey, I want to go over there. I want to be associated with this group. How can I, how can I get in? You're talking to those guys, and then you come back from that third deployment and move over there. And
yep.
Okay.
So I went to selection, and then I came back, and then I went to a low vis element as part of the SMU, and was when people say, hey, were you a cool guy in the unit? I don't really know what that means, but there's a lot more cooler guys that were in SMU than me. I was in the low vis element that did a whole bunch of technical stuff. A lot of it was low vis recce in a low vis capacity. Had really cool experiences. I got 2 additional rotations. I got to spearhead with one of the squadrons, we call it a re-invasion, but we were already there, but, reestablishing a base and an opportunity with a unit. So I went in 2009, went back and spun around and went back to Iraq. And then 10 went back and went to Afghanistan and got to operate in Kunduz and Mazar Sharif, where we had no eyes on bad guys in that AO.
Yeah.
Became a super impactful rotation for me, where, man, it was insane. It was insane war fighting because we basically hit the hornet's nest when we got there, and it was a super productive rotation. And I realized all the benefits to bear of bringing assets and the most highly trained warriors on the planet, and how it wasn't even a fair fight. I mean, we were just, I mean, dozens of bad guys every night. It was insane. It was awesome.
That is wild. So you do that time, and then is that your last deployment?
Yeah. So what happened is I made E8, and I made E8 very young. I made E8 when I was 30 years. I actually made the list when I was 29 on what we call the blacklist, which is the SMU list. And I was the last guy on the order of merit in 18 series to get promoted to E8. And so at the time, I was a young tech recce guy. And I'm like, man, what do I want to do with my career? Because an E8 in Special Forces is the top, you're the big dog. You're the team sergeant. And I was 29 years old. I was going to pin when I was 30, but I was a super young, experienced special operations guy. But nobody that I knew at the time was that young of a team sergeant. And at the time, I actually got requested by JSOC to stand up a commanders and extremist force for Africa. So this hadn't been done yet. I mean, we had commanders and extremist forces for every AOR except for Africa, because 3rd Special Forces Group, known as Bravo Company's 2nd Battalion, 3rd Group, B-23, we were busy in the Middle East because we were training Iraqis, and we were going out every night with the premier Iraqi counter-terrorism force, ICTF. And so they weren't willing to augment B-23, so they needed to stand up a new unit. So they actually they asked me, and they said, hey, would you be willing to come out and act as a Special Forces reconnaissance expert and help stand up C-210, which is the new Commanders and Extremist Force. So I flew out to Colorado. I met with Command Sergeant Major Bob Irby, who was there. And Bob Irby's a legend. He's like, man, look, what we're going to do is we're going to give you the opportunity to handpick your guys to stand up your Special Forces Reconnaissance Sniper Detachment for the recce, and then you'll be the first to operate in Africa. And I'm like, this is too good to be true. But it was true. And they gave us the opportunity. They said, these are the parameters, and me and another unit member left the unit and stood up that under JSOC's guidance. Long story, over the course of a year, we basically trained this element up. We handpicked our guys, we fired guys, we got them qualified. JSOC qualified us. And then when Benghazi happened, September 11th of 2012, I was actually in the SMU compound doing a cross engagement, and that thing kicked off. And then we got the word, we spun up, and then me and 2 of my guys were the first to rip into Libya to go after, at the time, this is unclassified now, it was classified at the time, but Abu Qatala, who was the guy responsible for coordinating the attack that killed, Ambassador Stephen Smith, and then the 2 former Navy SEALs, Glenn Doherty and Tyrone Woods. So I think I deployed a few weeks after that, and we went into the country, stood up a counterterrorism element that was a 12-way program, and went after them. And I spent the next 6 months in Libya running that counterterrorism program and looking after those guys.
No kidding. That is wild.
Yeah.
And what after your 6 months there, how close did you get, or did you? What was?
So 2 guys that were members of we call it Team Libya, positively identified Abu Qatala. We offered multiple courses of action, which were turned down by the chief. The country team turned it down. It wasn't the agency. It was the State Department. At the time, because Ambassador Stevens was killed, they had a charge that was in charge temporarily. His name was Alexander Pope, and he turned it down because of the political climate. I mean, verbatim, it said, we are not going to do this because of the political climate. We can't afford it politically. And so we did nothing. That, to me, was a very clear indication of my path moving forward in the military. And I came back from that rotation, and I think I was out of the Army within the next 3 weeks.
No way.
I mean, the agency recruited me when I was downrange because I had just finished in 2012, that same year, I had just finished my bachelor's degree, which is a prerequisite to become a Blue Badger, a full-time employee for OGA. And I started the process. And when I got back, I got out to transition into one, still, nickel and diming my retirement through the Special Forces Reserve, but also allowing myself to transition to work for OGA full time.
No kidding. And that's what you did. So you went through the process. You did the polys, did all that stuff. And did you go to the farm at that point?
Yeah. So here's what happened is, I don't know if you remember this time period, but that was when the sequester happened.
Okay. Yeah, I remember.
Left the military 3 phases into a 6-phase process, and they stopped hiring anybody. And they basically said to me, hey, we're running a hiring freeze. We're going to see how this unfolds. It was a highly charged political climate. And so what they said to me is, hey, we could send you downrange and you could be a GRS guy. And just for your listeners, I am very security minded, and I had to go to the office to get basically cleared to be able to say that I was a GRS guy. Now, the classified elements of that are the details in my relationships in the program itself, etc. But yeah, I went as an independent contractor, as a GRS guy, and in the interim, and went downrange immediately and started serving all over the world. And when it got cleared up, I had an option, and the option was you could go straight back to. I mean, I had been to the farm for the programs for the job that I was in. Actually, I went through a whole bunch of training, which is more than I thought existed. And they said, hey, we can go ahead and migrate you now. Well, when they went to migrate me, I think it was 3 or 4 rotations in. And the place that I was located at, I had seen paramilitary operations officers have a hard time about it. I mean, they had a very difficult, and again, this is a political climate thing. This is not operations. These guys wanted to do their jobs, but because of the political climate, they weren't allowed to do their jobs. So I came to a juncture and I said, let me hold off for a bit. And I kind of stalemated and did a few more rotations. I actually, at the time, I was in Pakistan with Ryan Owens' brother. And I won't say his name because he's still serving. But Ryan Owens was a SEAL Team 6 guy that was killed in a hostage rescue. Tragically killed, but courageously killed in rescuing a hostage that survived. And when he was killed, I was with his brother, and I came to I call these junctures, right? I came to a crossroad where I had decisions to make. I was at a point where I wanted to have a family, but knew in my OGA work that I would never have a family except for the family that I deployed with. I was coming back from my OGA rotations and immediately rotating at the time as a sergeant major, because I got promoted sergeant major. I was going to Africa, and then coming back and then spending a couple days home, and then going back to Africa or some crap hole in the Middle East. And then I realized I won't have a life. And at that time in Pakistan, this is, with combined war, this is 14, 15 rotations in. And I'm like, man, I want to start something different. And Ryan Owens' brother, who was my riding partner in GRS, helped me come up with some ideas. And that's where I started my company, FieldCraft Survival.
That is awesome. Yeah, it's great when you know. Like I knew when I was back from that last Iraq deployment, I never thought about anything other than training for war, than being the best combat leader I could possibly be. Then I get back from that deployment, take a breath, realize, okay, I'm in 04 now, and this is the last time I'll tactically maneuver guys on the battlefield. Now, if I come back, it says eventually after a staff job, you come back as a SEAL team commander, which means you're like a SEAL team manager in real life, and you're back there in the talk, and you're allocating assets and things like that, but you're not out there doing the job, kicking the doors with the guys, that sort of thing. So it's very clear, I'm back, taking a breath, family needs me, time to move on. So it's great when you have that clarity, because most people waver. Should I get out? Should I not? What am I going to do? I'm going to get out. Oh, wait. Did I make the right decision? Like there's a lot of that goes on. I didn't have it because I was very clear in what I was going to do in my path. It sounds like you were clear also. Like you were driving forward and then boom, you know what? It's time. And then you came up with FieldCraft Survival, downrange. And is that what you came up with this shirt? By the way, this is my favorite new shirt. Like I have 2 of them now and I love them. I just go from one to the other. But did you come up with this thing? Because when I saw it first, when I got this, I was like, he made a shirt. And then I put it on. I'm like, this thing is awesome. Like immediately, I love this thing. Like, I don't know what you did. Like, how do you, like, it's just a very odd thing for you. Cause like I have all this other stuff, which is awesome. You know, my FieldCraft, I use these things are amazing. These coasters. I love my FieldCraft. I got this, I got all this stuff. I got my medical stuff here. I'm gonna do a little gear deal on it later. But the shirt was like kind of like a one-off. It was like, wait, what? He designed an awesome shirt? Like how where did this thing come about?
So it actually stemmed from my rotation in Pakistan, which, you know, rolling around Pakistan in plain clothes, you need utility built into clothing. And utility for most people has to do with the proprietary blend of how it wears and how it wicks away moisture, how it keeps you warm, but not utility in like how active you could be. And, you know, even small details like the length below your waist where you can adequately draw a pistol and clear real estate, or even the bottom 3 buttons, for example, that are snaps, where you can pull it away to get to a
Yep. It's amazing.
Those details are super important to me. And when I decided to do clothing, it wasn't haphazardly. Like I've seen a lot of guys make the mistake of like private labeling clothing, and they don't own the process. They don't own the blend. So when we did this, it was very deliberate. I found a Ralph Lauren designer who's a buddy of mine in New York. We made a proprietary blend, meaning we own the actual blend. Even though proprietary blends are easy to skew and change numbers, it had to fit, wick away moisture, had to be air light, something that could like breathe on your body. So we owned that, and then we did it from scratch. So the material we sourced, the manufacturing we sourced, which is manufactured in New York, and we wanted to make sure it was done the right way with, you know, like even the handcuff key pocket where I would usually keep an ID card, because, you know, like in that country, you could get searched, you could get robbed, and everything that you're possessing could get stripped away from you. But if you have it in the back of your collar, that might be the little bit of life-saving tool to be able to, you know, extend your lifeline. So we paid attention to that, and that's something that we did, and we're going to continue to do. Like we have a whole line of clothing coming out this year, which includes more shirts, jackets, vests that all have utility focused as opposed to just looking good, which I think they look good as well.
Yeah, no, this thing is awesome. People comment on it all the time. Also, because it's it's niche and it's not, you know, out there, on a huge clothing company, or whatever. And you didn't just take something and throw FieldCraft Survival on it. So I get asked about it all the time. I love it. I'm going to send one to Chris Pratt out and try to get it in the series, because it is awesome. And he has to do some low vis stuff in the series. They're filming it right now, so I'm gonna see if I can get one of these or a couple of them out there, because they need one that like you can put blood on, one that you can cut. You know, one they need everything. Like all the weapons, everything they need like 5 or 10 of. That's just how it works. I thought you like got one knife, one gun, whatever. No, you get like 10 of these different things for different scenes and different angles that do different things. Some are real, some are not, like all that. But yeah, I'm super fan of the shirt and of what you're doing. So you have the idea downrange, and we're gonna wrap this up because I know you got to go, and we're gonna come back and do this again. We're gonna do a part 2 because I want to ask you all about the different schools that you got to go to, the ones you can talk about anyway, particularly any of the driving schools and that sort of thing, on-road, off-road, rally racing schools, because I have my eye on going to O'Neill Racing back in New Hampshire. I never got to go to that one. All my friends got to go, and they said that was of all the ones we went to. I went to 2. I went to BSR and Blackwater. Other guys did like ITI. We went to a whole bunch of different ones, and then we had some off-road recovery stuff, different ones over the years. But I really want to go to O'Neill Racing out in New Hampshire and do that, because that seems like it's a fun place, and rally racers or just rally drivers seem like some of the best drivers in the world.
Yeah, that's the best one. That was, out of all the schools I've been to O'Neill's 3 times. That was the funnest one, man, because the best one to go to is they do like a 1 week where they put you in front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, all wheel drive, so you can get a different feel. But go to that in the wintertime because it'll be covered in snow. And then the challenge of integrating all that stuff together is so super interesting. And I think one thing I do have, like I don't like to brag about my career because there's so many more significant people that have done way more than me. But I have a binder this big of certificates of training that I went to because I would never lull in time. I would always seek training. And I think I've been to, besides dive school, because I would drown. I'm not a very I've been to every single school, and that would be a super interesting podcast.
Let's do a part 2, hopefully in person, and sit down and talk about all that stuff. And so all that training now, so you have that idea, downrange, FieldCraft Survival, you come back, you get out, and then how long is it before inception and hitting the ground and getting out there, doing your first course? How does that, and we'll get back together and talk about all this in more detail. But like people all of a sudden, you just like think you just popped up out of nowhere. Well, what was that ramp up to now? Because I've been to the headquarters. It is awesome. It's amazing. You have a lot of people working for you, doing all these different courses, and you have merchandise, and you have all this amazing stuff going on. You're working on one of my vehicles. We're going to get this thing all set up and get me. I've been meaning to do it for a couple of years. It's been a busy couple of years here. So we're going to get that all done. So you have all that mobility side of the house. So from you got back, how long until you started FieldCraft Survival, and then how long till you do your first course?
Yeah, so I FieldCraft initially, I started my logo design and building out. Like I started, and this is a testament again back to the reading component. Like if you're a deliberate planner, and I think special operations, the best tool that they gave me was the ability to constructively, organized, and very deliberately lay out a plan of action, which is a plan that you could execute. I went and I basically did a concept of the operation on every single aspect of my business, from the current situation, the mission statement, on how to execute each and every facet of it, starting with a logo. And then I started crushing books on business. I didn't know a lot about business, and looking at back in hindsight, would I see the same people, the same mistakes that people make now, where they see entrepreneurs and they're like, oh, I could do this, like, and then they quit like a month later. It's because they didn't do their due diligence and homework. I spent the first 6 months doing that and getting everything digested, and then everything lined out, and everything from logo to the company name, the company structure and EIN. And then I was teaching my first course a couple months after I hit the ground back home. And it started with just me. That quickly scaled over the years to, I have 45 employees right now that work for me. A lot of subcontracted guys that train all over the United States. We have a Heber City office that's also a Sims scenario shoot house kind of thing in the back. We just bought a $120,000 simulator that's a 10-foot, 270-degree simulator that has 800 scenarios. We teach in 3 to 4 different states every weekend. I have another 5,000 square foot with a survival classroom that we do t-shirt manufacturing. We have a leather shop. We have a whole bunch of cool niches. I have 2,500 acres right down the road, 45 minutes from here, where we're going to be doing overland training, survival training, long range shooting. So it's scaled rapidly from where it was to where we are now. But the entire intent for us is to train civilians. Like when I came back from military experience, I realized there's not a lot outside of tactical training, which is a niche of preparedness training. There's not a lot for civilians. Even getting mindset or the understanding of kind of like a lifestyle of preparedness, which we lived, there's not a correlation or a way to map that. So I started FieldCraft with that intent. I don't focus on military. I don't focus on law enforcement, even though I'll always give them my attention. My main focus is taking civilians, which is every single person on this planet, and giving them the opportunity to kind of look at preparedness and go, hey, maybe that's something I should pay attention to. I think we live in a volatile world where, we had a shooting, for example, in Boulder, Colorado on Monday. Tragedy, right? And people often go look at that tragedy and go, oh man, that sucks for those people, prayers to those people. And I get that. But it's like, if we were in the military, we would look at that and go, hey, what are the lessons learned and how we could be better prepared to be able to not be victims or better respond as first responders to to make sure that we're not victims. I like to look at it that way and find in tragedy the way that we can get a lesson learned in improving our quality of life. And that is our mission set from the very beginning of FieldCraft.
Oh man, anything in life, we want to take those lessons and apply them going forward. When I launched my last book, Savage Son, it was April 12th of last year, kind of the height of uncertainty as far as health-wise. We didn't really know what this was going to do, job-wise, finances, parents, grandparents. Like, it was a very uncertain time. So as I launched, I was talking more often than not about being prepared, and not just being prepared, but hey, making notes right now. If you didn't feel prepared going into last February, last March, not April, well, identifying those things and then acting on them. So it's not enough just to be like, oh, we were worried there for a while that there wasn't gonna be any food in the grocery store. And oh, phew, now there's food in the grocery store again. Okay. Well, instead, okay, that's why I don't have that worry. Let's take that and apply it going forward and make sure that we have some food put away. What else? So what if I called 911 for a fire and no one was there to answer? Oh, do we have fire extinguishers in the house? Do I know how to use them? Do they even work anymore? Do the kids know how to use them? Does the babysitter know how to use them? Like, all those things, but not just identifying them, taking action on them. So that's what I talked a lot about as last April, and now I'm talking about it a lot again this time as I launch this next book, Devil's Hand, because now we've come full circle and we have those lessons of the last year. And then from the kids' perspective, last year they could look at their parents in the kitchen. They're going to hear things like they maybe look like they're playing video games or they're in their room or whatever, but they're listening and they're keying off this body language and they're saying, "Hey, your mom and dad, they're worried about something. What are they worried about? Oh, I hear this whisper. They're talking about, oh, maybe dad's not going to have a job. Mom's not going to have a job tomorrow because we don't know about this virus. Oh, now they're talking about food in the grocery store. Am I going to have any food to eat?" So even if you were in that situation, you can flip that around and you can have that active conversation, be like, "Hey, you know what? We weren't as prepared as we could have been, but you know what we're going to do this next time as soon as we possibly can? We're going to fix that. We're going to apply these lessons. And look what we have now. Look, we have water. We have something to filter the water in case, I turn this faucet on and it's coming out all brown or whatever. Here's a way to make fire in the backyard. Here's our fire extinguisher." Like, all these things, and the kids are part of that rather than just kind of on the outskirts, just worried about it. So even if you weren't prepared, you could turn that into a positive last year and this year. So now it's just important to do things like contact you, get on that website, which is fieldcraftsurvival.com, and you can look at all those different courses. I think there's on there the training, there's the products side of the house. There's a whole lot for people to explore. So if they weren't feeling as prepared as they could have been, or they were worried about certain things over this last year, once again, we have 7 million background checks over the last year, 2 million this last January alone. Well, guess what? Once you have that, if you're a new gun owner, or maybe you're an old gun owner that doesn't have the training, it's time to put in the requisite mat time, put in that ring time, put in the time training, and not just the static range type training, but all those other things that you offer as well, so that people know their capabilities and their limitations with their chosen weapon systems that they incorporate into their lifestyle. So I think what you're doing is absolutely incredible. I'm so glad you're here. Just down the street from me here in Utah is amazing. So where else can people go to find out? Website, Mike.A.Glover on Instagram, plus the FieldCraft Survival, FieldCraft Survival HQ, FieldCraft Mobility, FieldCraft Fit. There's a whole litany of FieldCraft things that people can follow on Instagram, and I highly encourage everybody to follow all of those. But what else do you tell people when they're interested in reaching out or starting down this path of preparedness? Where should they start?
Well, I think just as you started a podcast, I think the best form of education for us is the audible long form version, as well as video. So I would point people to go and select podcasts and choices that are good for you. The FieldCraft Survival Podcast is an option. We're on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're on the big platforms, but we release 2 podcasts every single week on everything that's preparedness. I would also advocate for YouTube as well, because we do a lot of video content that if you go back to the very beginning, which is years ago, we have 300,000+ subscribers on YouTube. So a lot of people are paying attention. I would advocate to start there as a start point. Get your family involved, watch videos, listen to education. And if it's something that you think you would find value in adding to your life, then hit us up at fieldcraftsurvival.com.
Awesome. Awesome, brother. Dude, thank you so much for taking all this time with me today. I sincerely appreciate it. And we'll do it again soon. We'll get back together in person. And hopefully here at the end of April, we'll sit down together and do an event down at FieldCraft Survival World Headquarters in Heber.
Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it. It's an honor and privilege. I love your podcast and I love the fact that you're doing this. Look forward to being on more and especially on seeing you for Devil's Hand at FieldCraft HQ. It's going to be awesome.
Awesome, brother. Well, thanks again, and we'll get together soon. Let's talk about some gear. I'm a gear person and have been my whole life, before the military, during the military, after the military. I use it in my books to develop characters because what I see somebody using and how they're using it tells me a lot about that person in real life. So that carries right over into my novels. So I want to talk about some FieldCraft survival gear today. So if you want to learn about mobility, want to learn about firearms, medical, all of those things that make us more self-reliant citizens, well, FieldCraft Survival is your place. Check them out. And I love this shirt. So this is my new favorite shirt right here. Mike designed this thing. And I'm not one to get too excited about shirts, but this thing is legit. And you'll have to actually get one to know what I'm talking about. But check this out, FieldCraft Survival. Mike designed it. Hit that website and they tourniquets, tourniquet holders. They have all sorts of stuff. I love the leather work they're doing over there. You can see that. So got my notebook here. The coasters are awesome. And they have packages, different kind of packages for medical supplies. So I have a few of these actually, backpack, Carr, scattered about. So I have these, little EDC carrier thing right there. And then this right here for the back seat in your car. This is awesome to organize things. So this goes in the back of your car, Velcro, so you can grab one of these things, take it off. I think this one's, I put some binos, what did I put in here? You put different things in here. I have that's pretty good. Got my SIG binos in there, so those are always at the ready. Got a tourniquet that's ready to rock. Got another med kit in here. Bam, yeah, I got space blankets in here. So you can do anything with this. So this is legit, a lot bigger package down here with a more robust med kit for your vehicle. And what's great about this is it's super easy to get off the back of your car seat right here. So it goes behind the driver or passenger. And you can take this thing and it turns in to a backpack. So you can get away from your car, you can bail out, and you have all the things that you need to survive as you depart that vehicle. So, bam, check that out, FieldCraft Survival, and check them out on YouTube. Also, a lot of videos that talk about all these different things about their courses, and most importantly, other than having these things, is training with these things, knowing how to use them, and not just you, but for your family. So can't recommend FieldCraft Survival enough. Great people over there, and I'll be taking some courses as well because these skills are perishable. So thank you for joining me. Until the next time, stay strong, keep fighting.